and welcome to this National Family Caregivers Month teleconference, hosted by MS Focus, the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation, and made possible with support from Novartis. I'm your host, Casey Minnis, Director of Communications for MS Focus, and I'm joined by Zachary White, PhD, who will discuss the topic, When Getting Through Isn't Good Enough. Please note, there are slides available for this presentation. To view them, and in order to ask questions during the Q&A session following this presentation, you need to connect to the conference online. Go to readytalk.com and join with the access code 7766805. That's readytalk.com and use the access code 7766805. Now, let me tell you a little bit about our speaker. Zachary White earned his PhD in communication from Purdue University and is an associate professor in the James L. Knight School of Communication at Queen's University of Charlotte. Dr. White's research and teaching focused on helping people manage meaning and communicate life experiences amidst high levels of uncertainty and stress. An award-winning university professor, he teaches a variety of undergraduate and graduate courses addressing topics such as patient-provider communication, caregiver communication, the patient experience, health and illness narratives, digital health literacy, online social support, and sense-making amidst life transitions. He's the founder of the award-winning blog and resource for caregivers called The Unprepared Caregiver, and the co-author of the upcoming book, The Unexpected Journey of Caring, The Transformation from Loved One to Caregiver. Dr. White, thank you for being with us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Casey. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate all of you joining us this evening. And I want to thank MS Focus as well for making this possible on Caregivers Month. And I kind of want to start by talking about the fact that you joining us tonight, whether experiencing MS and or a caregiver, are the experts. And so I don't see myself an expert in your experiences. But as Casey mentioned, in terms of my background and research, I have thoroughly examined the caregiver experience by interviewing hundreds of caregivers across the life cycle of different types of care experiences. And so many of my insights tonight will be drawn from those experiences, but throughout, I ask you to think about your own experiences in the context of what I'm talking about, knowing that you truly are the authentic and sole expert of your experiences. You know, it's kind of interesting when we think about how we carry ourselves in our everyday lives. Most of us see ourselves as kind of have life scripts or life narratives that we walk around with. We interact with people, of course, on a daily basis, and we see them as people, but within our own minds, there's a whole life world going on. And that's what I call a life script. It includes things like our dreams or our expectations about what we think will happen or what we think could happen. And so, or what we think should happen as well. They tell us how to act and what is important and what is unimportant and what we should pay attention to and what we shouldn't pay attention to. It's kind of like, you know, speaking from experience of someone who is completely directionally illiterate. It is the script in our heads when we find ourselves in the habit of everyday life, whether we drive ourselves to work or we have a particular path in our everyday habits. The moment we're removed from our habits, do we realize that the scripts, the ways in which we just habitually move from point A to point B and think about how life should unfold changes, we realize that the script in our head doesn't always correspond with the challenges in front of us. And so if you're looking at the PowerPoint slide here and you see this first slide, and it's a tunnel. And so you may be asking yourself, why is he showing a tunnel here? And this tunnel to me represents something that all of us have, particularly when we think about our lives before they were interrupted or changed by MS and or our caregiving experiences. And this is kind of our dreams, this tunnel here. Think about how we contemplate our dreams and our aspirations. Like a tunnel, it's completely focused. We have one way that we're looking at this, complete predictability. And it seemingly is remarkably coherent. Like a mathematical equation, the shortest distance between 2 points, where there's a clear beginning and ending. It's almost as if when we dream of how life is unfolding, when things are going well, when our script, our narrative seemingly makes sense, it's as if we're acting in the world in a way in which there's complete connection between what I'm doing and what is happening. There's cause and effect, and effort or desire or dedication seemingly brings about what we want. Well, we know that when life becomes interrupted or what we think should happen doesn't happen, this doesn't make sense anymore. This idea of a tunnel of focus doesn't relate to your everyday experiences. I think it's more like this. And I'm talking about an image here that is unlike a tunnel in so many ways. There's no clear beginning and ending in this image. There is a series of beginnings and endings, and there's lines of different color that might represent your relationships with other people, whether you have MS, your relationship with your caregiver or your loved one or your spouse or your son or your daughter, whomever is helping you or in your life, that your life intersects with others in so many ways that can't be contained and is not permeable. Rather, it overflows and spills into others' lines, and others' lines spill into your line. And so I think this is a much better reflective image of your experiences as we talk tonight. Unlike the tunnel image of our dreams prior to our experiences, this is completely unpredictable and completely permeable, open to influences that we didn't think or plan for or didn't even think to prepare for. It's incoherent. It's hard to explain to ourselves, let alone to others. And that's what I want to spend tonight talking about, is this idea that when life comes at us in ways that we didn't predict, it's similar to someone stealing this script that you had in your mind, that you've been working off maybe your whole life. And the difference is that for all of us as adults, it's not like the lines that we had written down go away when a diagnosis of MS happens or the spectrum of symptoms flares up in ways that we still couldn't have predicted even months ago or years ago, or our spousal relationship is now as much a caregiving relationship as it is a spousal relationship. It's not like someone crosses out these lines, these scripts that we had in our mind that we didn't even need to think about before. They were normal and expected. No, our script that we have in our own minds is never blank. It's there even if our expectations and our hopes and our dreams are no longer possible. They're there, but we are constantly revising them as we're going. So you have the script from the previous slide of what you thought would happen or what you expected to happen, and yet it doesn't fit anymore. It no longer corresponds to your everyday reality, but you can't let go of the lines that you thought should be there. And I think that's a really important point, because all of us here tonight, impacted by MS in some way, must rewrite our scripts without preparation or practice or forethought. And you're asked to rewrite your script to fit your everyday experiences at the very time in your life when you are emotionally and socially exhausted. And let's be honest, you're probably downright vulnerable. So it's almost asking the impossible of you, because the scripts that made so much meaning and made so much sense that you never had to think about them no longer work for you. In fact, they might feel radically inauthentic or unworkable even, misleading and counterproductive in relationship to your newfound experiences. And so this is important, I believe, tonight as we think about self-compassion in our experiences, because it requires us to do something that we oftentimes do when we are in the midst of overwhelming experiences. I mean, maybe you've heard when you were in school or you talk to your friends or children about procrastination. And all of us procrastinate in a variety of aspects of our lives, right? I mean, you've probably heard phrases like, keep your head down and keep going. In your own experiences with MS or as a caregiver, maybe you are telling yourself daily, and maybe you've been telling this to yourself for months or even years on end. I just got to grind. I've just got to get up and do what I need to do. And maybe like tonight at the end of your rope, you're saying, yeah, I'll start thinking about what all this experience means for me in ways I didn't anticipate when it's over. And I just got to keep on going and keep my head down. Well, the problem with that is that you're in the midst of procrastination when you have all kinds of time-based expressions that you may never share with other people, but that you tell yourself as a way to get through the day. When life gets better, I'll figure out what's going on with myself and how it's impacting how I see myself and how I need to revise my script, my narrative, the way I talk about my experiences, the way I talk about what's valuable in my everyday life. When life returns to normal. Or as a caregiver, you might say, when I get my life back. Or if you're in the midst of symptoms right now with MS, when I get my life back to the way that I remember it to be 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago. Later, when it's the right time or tomorrow. But there is a point. There's a point, and maybe you're at that point right now, where procrastination has deep and significant consequences, where you feel like you can no longer delay what's going on in terms of you have no more patience or tolerance for telling yourself that tomorrow or when life gets better or when life returns to normal that you will make sense of what's going on in your life. And so this moment typically happens when we no longer recognize ourselves in the stories we tell other people, or when we no longer recognize ourselves in the stories that people tell about us and our experiences. And for a moment here, I'd like to pause and ask you to think about this question as it pertains to your own life. And if you want, you can type out a response in the Q&A participant feedback box there. Can you recall a moment in your own experiences recently when you didn't recognize yourself in the stories others were telling about you? And I'll pause here for a moment to have us think about that, because there's nothing more disturbing, there's nothing more alienating than making ourselves feel like strangers when those who are closest to us seemingly have no idea what our experiences are. It can make our experiences ring hollow, and at that moment when we have a spouse or a loved one or a friend or a coworker talking about our lives in ways that don't relate to what it is that we are living, it makes us feel more apart and more different than others, and we begin to then see ourselves in relationship to other people radically different. For example, maybe this is particularly poignant when we talk about MS as a chronic experience. This is not a broken arm that we're talking about. This is an experience that is chronic in nature, whether it's the person, if you are experiencing MS yourself, or if you're a caregiver tonight listening. It's really difficult for people to understand your experiences because there are no clear beginnings, perhaps, to the script that you're in the midst of. And there may be no clear endings to the journey that you're on. One of the most significant challenges that people have when trying to articulate their experiences, their chronic experiences, is that there's no beginning and ending, but just a series of ongoing and seemingly unending middles. And this notion of a middle doesn't translate well to other people who are used to beginnings and climaxes and conclusions. So when your friends or family or well-wishing and good-intentioned loved ones tell you that you need to take time for yourself or have self-compassion, maybe you've heard someone recently today or this last week when you were with them in Thanksgiving family and they said, you need to be kind to yourself. You've got to take care of yourself. You've got to find value in the now. These are all well-wishing statements that are good intention, but for people who's in the midst of chronic experiences, you may have done what most people do. And you may have distanced yourself even more from the well-intentioned statements that people made about wanting you to take care of yourself because you say, what do you know about my experiences? What you think of my experiences is very different than my lived everyday caregiving experiences, or very different from my lived everyday MS challenges. And so tonight I want to emphasize this point. The idea that self-compassion doesn't come from ourselves. The challenge to being compassionate to ourselves and kind to ourselves is really an audience problem as much as it is anything else. It is nearly impossible for us to be kind to ourselves when we are the only voice that we hear or the only voice that we believe, despite the fact that we may be surrounded by people who have our best, who love us and care for us. So I call this audience misalignment, this imbalance between what you need and what others can provide. In your experiences right now, we all wear different masks through our lives. And when I talk about masks, I'm talking here metaphorically about the idea that we all present ourselves to others in ways that adjust and contort maybe our true or most authentic selves. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all wear masks at different times. However, when there is a disparity or difference between what you need and what we believe others want or need from us, you're most aware of your own masks. And I want you tonight to think about the mask that you are wearing, or the mask that you believe you wear most often, because we all wear masks. And so the point is not you only wear one mask. I want you to think about which one you wear most frequently and what are some of the consequences of wearing this mask when it comes to helping you become more compassionate to your own experiences. So let's go through some of these masks and we'll ask ourselves, and maybe you can come forward and type into your response or to Casey what mask you feel you've had to wear or felt compelled to wear the last month, for example. So let's talk about the saint mask. Have you been told recently that you're a pretty incredible person and that you're greeted initially by family and friends and coworkers and people that you meet with awe and appreciation? Oh my gosh, I can't believe that you endure your experiences so well. And they almost talk of you and speak of you as if you are otherworldly. At first it's kind of a rush that people think of you this way. But it's interesting when you start to think about this mask and the consequence it has for how you present yourself to others in terms of how it impacts how you see yourself. Notice that appreciation when you're wearing this mask is from afar. You're kind of put on a pedestal. People might say, I can't believe you're doing so much. Or, there's just no way that I could experience what you're experiencing every day. I don't know how you do it. I'm too emotional. There's no way that I would be able to do that. some of the downsides that you might experience when you feel like you are kind of compelled to wear the saint mask is that people see you as just distinctly different from them, like you're involved in something absolutely extraordinary. And there's nothing wrong with being extraordinary, but when you're extraordinary, when you're a saint-like in the image of others, it doesn't really require other people to want to understand you rather than just hold you up on a pedestal. Because sainthood means you can't have moments of self-doubt or lapses in faith. It almost prevents you from talking or sharing about those experiences that are less than saint-like. In that way, it almost asks you to be silent. So you can't share or live up, so you can live up to the expectations of what others need you to be. You know, saints don't really need to be listened to. After all, when you're wearing the saint mask, you're a saint, not necessarily a person. So if you feel like you sometimes wear the saint mask and feel as if you can't share with others what you truly are experiencing, maybe you can write that down in the questions section here. But there are other masks we wear as well. The everything is okay mask. Do you ever wear this? This is where you feel compelled to give people what they want. Nothing to see here. I mean, you get lots of attention directed toward kind of devoting unending and lots of effort towards maintaining the appearance of normality. Do you spend a lot of emotional energy trying to convince people that you are okay? And you find yourself spending so much emotional energy to make them feel better so they don't feel off? Everything must be okay so others around you will not have to reconcile or think about what might happen if life isn't okay or if it doesn't return to normal. You know, when you wear this mask, it allows other people to feel comfortable because you're approachable. You might put on appearances or might perform okayness because it reminds others around you that life is still within control. You're still the same person you once were. And it also celebrates this idea that other people still appreciate this desire to return to life as it once was lived. And there's nothing wrong with this, but if you feel a little bit suffocated by this mask, because if you wear it long enough, and if everything is always okay, even though it may not feel okay to you, it may prevent you, the wearer of this mask, from allowing yourself to really think about what is happening to you. The part of you that is changing, the part of you that is evolving, the parts of you that may not feel okay. You know, you might sacrifice your own needs at the expense of others because you have to privilege the sense that life is normal rather than being positive all the time, rather than being positive and being able to share how you can be both positive and devastated, coping and overwhelmed, a different person and the same person. So you're asked really to clean up doubts and confusions and contradictions when you wear this mask. If you're wearing this mask, go ahead and type that in. You're not alone. We all wear this mask, but you may feel more like you're wearing this more frequently than you ever have before. Another mask that you may be wearing is the fighter mask, and this is the universally popular mask where it's fight, fight, and fight. It's really challenging, however, when you think about the fighter mask and the chronic experience that you may be experiencing as a caregiver or with MS. You know, this mask asks you, the wearer, to give the impression that all challenges can be overcome if you simply have the desire at all costs to fight, fight, fight. And it creates this sense that all conversations that you have with other people have to be about the fight. They have to all be about treatment. They have to all be about a cure. They all have to search for solutions, battle plans. And while that may be essential, there are downsides to this mask that prevent you from being authentic and self-compassionate. Because if every conversation is about a cure, The mask doesn't allow you to explain the in-between battles, the peace that you might be able to experience. If you're always a soldier, there's always a winner and a loser. And if you're not a winner or a loser, then there's silence. But there is a need that you may not be able to experience when you wear this mask about fragility, about intimacy, or about moments of peace. So those are some of the common masks that you might wear. And when you wear these masks, you might even feel more alone and less trustworthy of others and more dubious of your interactions with those who are closest to you. You know, the interesting thing is that even though your life script is under construction, it's under revision, when we're most vulnerable, when we realize there's a disparity between what others need us to be and what we're experiencing, we feel and yearn more than ever before for a sense of connection and mutuality and authenticity. And so let's talk about what that might mean when we think about our audiences, because the point I'm trying to drive home tonight is that our desire for audience is greater than ever before, but we need to rethink how we interact with our audiences so we can become more self-compassionate and find value and meaning in today rather than postponing or procrastinating that until the next day or the month after that. So let's take a look for a moment at our first audience, family and friends. I hope that you are surrounded by family and friends as a caregiver or someone with MS. But I want to talk about family and friends a little bit differently from the perspective of your ability to leverage a capacity to be authentic. You know, your family and friends are your strongest networks, and they're the longest lasting networks that you have. But if we think about them through the lens a little bit differently than we normally do, we can understand them in thinking about an alignment between your support needs and what those around you, your family and friends, can actually provide. So I'm a big proponent of family and friends, but I want us to think about whether family and friends can suffice in all of our needs when we talk about that alignment between what you need to share and what others can provide. So throughout life, when our script makes sense and our dreams are clear and there's a cause-effect in our life that makes sense, family is great. But when our lives are interrupted, and we think about the slide with the 100 different colored lines coming in and out, shaping us and feeling more uncertain in life, more incoherent, our friends and family, the very fact that they are similar to us may be a liability. Because we find ourselves surrounded by people who were like us. But now, because of MS or because of your caregiving experiences, that one similarity that so bound you together may be a source of a liability, because they may not know your experiences, or they may not be able to know what you experience, because they don't have access to the experiences that you do and are going through. You know, it's a common thing. Our family and friends are so like us, and that works in so many ways until life is interrupted. The second bullet point, a challenge with family and friends in terms of alignment between what we need and what others can provide us, is that they oftentimes can't separate you from what you are experiencing or sharing. You know, I mean, simply put, this is just judgment. And it's not that our family and friends are bad people. It's just sometimes they can't let go of our shared history. You know, they're more likely than anyone else to minimize our concerns, even more so than strangers. Not because they're uncaring, but they can't interpret you and what you're going through and what you're sharing apart from what they know of you or what they need from you or what they expected from you or what they remember from you. And so it's really almost impossible for them to take what you're saying objectively, because they see you through the lens of a past and a shared history and a shared or expected future with you. Continuing thinking about family, friends in terms of what, you know, the alignment between your needs and what they can provide, family and friends are always loyal to who you were. But sometimes it's difficult for those closest to us to be loyal to who we are becoming. The change, you know, when you're diagnosed with MS or when symptoms and physical incapacities become more prominent, it's impossible for you not to change. And sometimes family and friends might say something like, that's not like you to talk like that. That's not like you to think about that. These new forms of uncertainty unsettle them because they know you in ways that sometimes can hold you hostage to the past. You know, when family and friends lead with what's wrong rather than tell me what is happening, you know you're in the company of family and friends. Only family and friends would approach you with the what's wrong. You're not acting like you were before. You're not as positive as you were before. You know that the family and friends sometimes have a hard time adapting to who you're becoming versus who they remember you to be. And so it's difficult for them to separate you from your situation. And then this other bullet point of relational stakes are so very high when we talk to family and friends. Because we have an expected future with our family, we have to be very careful in terms of what we say or disclose or share, because we oftentimes feel like we need to put on more masks with our family and friends because we need them. We are dependent on them. We don't want to hurt or harm them. They're there for us. They may say or do things that are hurtful or don't allow us to be the people that we think we need to share with. But creating awkwardness or embarrassment or saying something that may impact my relationship with my loved one tomorrow changes what I can say in the moment. And we find ourselves editing more so than ever before. You know that you're in the midst of family when what you don't say is as powerful as what you do say. And there's nothing like what we say to family and friends or what they say or don't say to us that can hurt us so very deeply because the temporary is made permanent. Sometimes we find ourselves over-accommodating to family and friends because we know that the stakes are always so high, that we love the people who are closest to us, and they sometimes have power over us that makes it difficult, that we can't share with them in the same ways because we already feel that we are overburdening them, and if we authentically share something in the moment, we might regret it more so than we could ever imagine. So for a moment here, let's pause. I was thinking about family and friends as an incredible audience for us, but sometimes there is a misalignment because what we need may not be able to be only fulfilled by family and friends. So I'm asking you to think about this question and fill in the blank here. I have the hardest time explaining blank to family and friends. I have the hardest time explaining blank to family and friends. Sometimes when you feel like that, when those closest to you sometimes are incapable of understanding what you need to share or the way in which you need to share what you need to share, it can make us feel audienceless or isolated. And what happens in that process is that when we feel alone, we kind of remove ourselves from others, even though they are near us. And the voice that we use to talk to ourselves when we're exhausted and alone, it's usually not very supportive. It's, to be honest, isn't it, usually nasty and pretty unrelenting. Add exhaustion and isolation in that voice, that self-voice that no one else hears, it almost never apologizes. Think about it. Apologies are born out of an expected response to other people. We're okay apologizing to other people, but when was the last time you apologized to yourself? And so that's the real challenge of feeling audienceless, that you don't have, your needs may not be able to be met in total by those around us. And there's no audience that can fulfill all of our needs, particularly when our life scripts are interrupted. Because what happens when we're exhausted and feel alone, this is what happens here. We start changing how we not only how we talk to ourselves, but how we interpret the world around us. We might say something like, today was so difficult. But when audienceless, we might say, every passing day will get more and more difficult. We take the temporary and make it more permanent. There is no one there to check us. or I am exhausted right now becomes I don't have the energy to do this anymore. Temporary becomes permanent. I feel so alone right now. Might become no one can ever truly understand what I'm going through. So as we pause here, I want to make the point that meaningful, mutual, and authentic connections make possible self-compassion and meaning making. And when sometimes family and friends, those that are closest around us, cannot always fulfill that mutual or authentic connections that we might need in terms of sharing or talking or being authentic in the way that we are representing our experiences. Not because they don't want to and not because we don't love them, simply because of our relationships complicates that possibility. So I want you to think about this possibility tonight in terms of expanding our audiences, to think about what you can do to expand your audiences and reach online beyond your existing networks to create greater possibilities for you to be self-compassionate and make valuable meaning out of your experiences today, rather than procrastinating and putting them off until life becomes more manageable. One thing that audiences beyond us, whether online or a social support group through MS Focus in your area, can do is that these audiences can allow us to present ourselves in ways that we can't do with others. Online or in a social support group, you can determine how you want to present yourself. You can focus on the aspects of yourself that you really want to feature, not what people already know, not what people already remember, not the part of you that is visual, but the part of you that you want to represent. You can lead with your words. You can focus their attention, not what you're wearing, not particular incapacities, not how you're saying something. And you can edit how you want to say what you say in the way that you want to, in the detail and depth that you want to. You become the author when you are able to present yourself in an online social support group, for example. You are the author. You, perhaps for the first time, can begin to tell your story about your experiences in ways that you want to tell it. Another opportunity that you might gain in terms of self-compassion and meaning-making is reaching beyond your existing networks so you can access differences that matter. Accessing people because they are different from the people that are physically around you. What online social support networks focusing on caregiver experiences or MS experiences allows you to connect with people who have a clearer perception of what's going on in your situation than you might ever be able to, because they're in it too. Instead of listening to yourself, you might be able to gain different perspectives from those that you can believe and trust, because they don't tell you what's going on from afar or what they want to happen, but they are sharing their experiences in ways that connect with your own everyday experiences. So these people might be purposely different from you from around the country or around the world, but maybe they too have MS, or maybe they too are caregivers. And something powerful can happen in these situations in which you can give yourself permission to care for yourself and allow you to see yourself and your experiences from a perspective that you would never be able to render when you hear yourself talking to yourself over and over again. And simply because you say it over and over again doesn't mean it becomes more real, even though you might be more likely to believe your own voice when it's unchecked. Another opportunity for you when reaching online beyond your existing networks is to be able to regain a semblance of control, to think about messages that you want to send when you are ready, not when someone else is ready, not when simply others are available. And let's think about it. Your experiences and your greatest challenges don't happen during business hours. Your emotional or support needs or needs to vent or hear from others like you don't just happen when others are available. And your ability to find others who are available in your area may be limited, and your access to others may be limited. So this provides you, when you go online to an online support group, to reclaim some sense of control, getting support when you need it. And it also allows others to listen in a way that they cannot do in a face-to-face interaction. It allows them and you to think about how you want to respond. Instead of someone saying, I can't talk now, or I'm in the middle of something, or I'm at work, can you wait? Online, the ability to respond in the time that is right for you is paramount. And moving along here, what we also find when reaching beyond your existing networks, whether in a social support group or in an online social support group, is lowering the stakes. Sometimes communicating only with family and friends who know us so well can be exhausting. But here, online, you can create messages that separate you from your message. You can get distance from your own message for the first time, perhaps. You don't have to be there when other people read what you're writing. You don't have to be overwhelmed by the moment when you're trying in a face-to-face situation to be eloquent when talking about the most difficult aspects of your experience, with tears or embarrassment or stuttering. When you're able to do this online, it gives you or empowers you to be able to write and construct what you want to say in the way you want to say it without having to be present when someone is interpreting your message. And then finally, voicing the full range of your experiences with people in social support groups can provide you something that family and friends may not be able to do, or coworkers. Most people in their good intentioned ways have a very kind of either-or perception of your situation. You know, either it's depressing or it's simply a type of sainthood for you. I mean, allowing you to share with others who have common experiences with you might allow you for the first time to talk about the funny parts of your experiences, the resentments you might have that make you a human being revising your own narrative, the grievous parts of your experiences, the joyous parts of your experiences that go beyond others' understandings of you, your experiences as only depressing. Because no longer, when you're talking with others in an online support group or in a support group, no longer do they have to believe that it's only depressing. You don't have to build the argument, because in doing so, it might make you feel even more and more different. So I kind of want to move here to having us think about what we've talked about tonight in terms of self-compassion and reclaiming a sense of meaning about our experiences today, rather than putting them off or postponing them. One way to do that in an authentic way is to think about realigning your audiences. You know, we think about realigning our realignment on a car, right? Realigning how we are in relationship to others. Family and friends are essential opportunities for support and connection and help. But family, friends, and the and we've talked about tonight is our social support opportunities, in person or online. Doing so will allow you in ways that you can't when you are separate and apart from others, feeling like you're only wearing masks. It makes it almost impossible to make meaning about your experiences today. And if you don't understand and create value about your experiences today, it makes it much more challenging to get through the everyday. So we've talked about matching your needs with audiences. Instead of asking family to be everything or friends to be everything, when you expand your audiences, you allow your family and friends to be family and friends, rather than information support, emotional support, companionship support, and expect them to fully understand the deepest details of your experiences because they themselves aren't going through it. In doing so, you will allow yourself, give yourself permission to tell multiple stories to multiple audiences. Most of the time, we think we have to tell one story about our experiences. But I think when we do that, we might find ourselves, as we talked about in the beginning, that you might feel you're speaking of yourself as if you are a stranger. You are multiple people, even as you're revising your life narratives. When you are able to talk to family and friends, telling them one story about your experiences may be a little bit different than the stories you tell to those who are experiencing it. And allowing yourself to tell multiple stories and to practice those drafts and those revisions of your life script will allow you to better understand what you're going through and what it means to you. And you're much more likely to satisfy the needs that you have, knowing that no one audience can fulfill all of those needs. And tonight, having talked about online social support groups, there are some I would like to draw your attention to. And if you see the slides in front of you, the MS Focus is on Facebook, and that can be a great opportunity for you to target and to specifically reach out to those who are experiencing similar experiences to you. There may be different levels or spectrums in the MS experience, or maybe different types of caregivers, but nonetheless, you will render some value to their experiences because of the reasons we talked about tonight. Same thing with MS World and Caregiver Action Network for the caregivers tonight. To think about reaching out to caregivers who are going through similar challenges to you that you may not be able to share with your loved one. And your loved one who has MS may not be able to share with you, not because they don't want to, but because of the very reasons we talked about tonight. And then, of course, MS Focus does an incredible job of making it possible throughout the country to access in-person social support groups, which would fulfill many of the things we talked about tonight. And as Casey mentioned at the beginning, if any of the ideas tonight rang true with you and speak to your experiences and you'd like to know more about them, I do have a book coming out in June with my co-author, Donna Thompson. And the title of our book is The Unexpected Journey of Caring, the transformation from loved one to caregiver. And I think that you will find it's an exploration of what happens when our life narratives are taken from us or changed, and the disorientation that happens, the reorientation that needs to happen. And then we talk in this book about how you can be a better advocate for yourself and your family. And finally, as Casey mentioned, you can also find me on unpreparedcaregiver.com, where you'll find many different articles that speak to the experiences when life is interrupted from a caregiver's perspective and or from any experience in which what we thought doesn't correspond to what is happening. If there are any questions at this moment, this would be an opportunity for you to type them and for us to have a conversation if you would like. But I do thank you, as you're thinking about the questions you might type, I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight and for you taking time to listen to me as we had this conversation.
Well, thank you so much. While we're waiting to see if there are any questions, there are a few questions that I had jotted down, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You talked about the different masks that people tend to wear, and it seems to me like for example, the saint mask is something that maybe is imposed on you by other people's expectations, but is it that the everything is okay mask is something that people are more likely to choose to wear themselves?
That's a great question. I think it's a mutual construction of this mask. People who recognize what others need of them, and I think that anytime anyone's life is interrupted, you're more aware of what people need from you because you can tell in their own responses to what you're saying. If you for a moment say, life isn't okay, and you see the response others give you or don't give you, or they back away as you say that, or they notice that you're tearing up, or that you say something in a way that doesn't quite fit within the I'm going to get through it mentality, then you quickly adopt this mask in order to give people what they want, as well as also perhaps to remind yourself of what you want too. But the challenge is in that mask is that in giving the appearance of okayness at all times, it leaves little, if any, space to explore or connect with people on those parts of your experience that are not okay and that are challenging. And what happens is with these masks is it becomes kind of an either-or experience. People step away and kind of, in a very nice way, but they don't know how to respond when you might say, you know what, today isn't okay, or I'm not going to be okay right now. I think caregivers and people experiencing illness or chronic conditions are so hypersensitive to other people's responses that they pick up on those social cues so much differently than most others. And so you kind of make a choice. Do I want to say what I feel, or do I want to say something that won't make people jump away from me?
So you're saying then that the sensitivity to the other person's emotions is leading people to put on this mask. We see a lot with people with MS. Speaking of the fighter mask, there's there's whole communities of people who refer to themselves as MS warriors, and certainly there's positives in that. But do you feel that people become trapped in this idea of fighting the disease?
Right, and it's always delicate to talk about because there's nothing more noble than wanting to, it's a sign of love of life, a sign that you appreciate your experiences, that you want to fight what's going on. And that makes so much sense until it starts to turn on you, because what it makes you be a fighter 24 hours a day. And there's nothing more noble perhaps than being an MS warrior, but can others see you as an MS warrior and MS vulnerable? Can others see you as an MS warrior and a human being who, like everyone, has ups and downs and challenges and bad days and better days, and days in which fighting may not be the appropriate response? Because if you think about kind of taking that fighter mentality literally, the idea that you are holding your hands up and you are looking for battles at all times means it sometimes is more difficult to understand and make meaning out of the experiences that you are having, rather than kind of postponing. And fighting is always about what's going to be next. How are you going to take on the next task? How are you going to, and there's real essential value in that. But when that is the only response, sometimes people's bridge to us is only through treatment, only through cure possibilities. And those are always dangled out in the future. And the present is valuable too. The present has to be valuable too. It has to be for it to make sense. The fighter mask makes a lot of sense to others who feel better about the possibility that things might change. But as things might change with cures and treatment possibilities, there's lives being lived. And the life that is being lived, no one sees what happens to the fighter when they're outside of the ring.
Very true. One more question. You talked about being able to tell multiple stories to multiple audiences. Can you give an example of how that would work in practice?
Well, it's kind of an acceptance of the fact that, for example, if you are still able to be employed, and if people at work are asking how things are going or how are you feeling, you might be bound by giving them the appearance of something that may not be absolutely authentic. For example, you might say, I'm doing okay, I'm managing my symptoms right now very well. And that can be absolutely accurate and authentic. At the same time, if you have access to social support groups outside the context of work colleagues, you might be able to tell a story of, I'm managing my symptoms, however, I am concerned about these emerging symptoms that are occurring, or my inability to manage my work expectations with what's happening to me. And both are true. Both are true and authentic and real and accurate, but one may be they're also inappropriate to tell to different audiences. And so just like you would in any other situation that you might talk with a spouse differently than you might talk to a neighbor, neither is necessarily inaccurate, but the idea that we have one unchanging way that we talk about our experiences is distortive, because it forces us into consistency and this idea that our illness is, or our condition is, one thing for all people and it's unchanging. But we know that's not the case. It's dynamic and it's hourly dependent or daily dependent, and symptoms come and they flare, and what happens is if we tell someone at work that things are not going well, then how do we generate the beginning of, oh, things are better now, or vice versa? If things are going well and then things suddenly take a turn differently, how do you initiate the discussion with a supervisor or a colleague that things are different now? That's really, with the chronic challenge, I think this notion of multiple stories is particularly powerful and challenging. You know, when things are well, we're okay to tell one story. Yeah, you know, I'm getting married, or I just won the lottery. You know, we tell that one story, and that becomes our identity. When we're in the midst of chronic experiences, there are multiple truths that have to be told simultaneously, but they can't always be understood by one audience alone. And I think that's when we're most likely to feel like we're an imposter, most likely to feel like what we are saying doesn't ring true with our experiences.
And how important is that sense of authenticity?
I think it's essential to self-compassion, simply because no one completely feels authentic, but when you feel disconnected from your experiences and disconnected from other people, and you feel like no one can understand what I'm going through, then what happens is oftentimes the way that we talk to ourselves is just very unforgiving. And so I do think that there's a connection between authenticity and alignment with audiences that can understand the different parts of our experiences. It's almost, you know, throughout my interviews with caregivers and people through life experiences that have been uprooted and upended, the resentment happens the moment they stop trying to connect to others, when they tell themselves that no one can or no one wants to understand what I'm experiencing. It becomes a kind of perceptual error or distortion. And oftentimes we then are our only voice. And when we're our only voice, it's so hard to give ourselves permission. I mean, think about the last time you were kind to someone else. It probably, you can come up with an example relatively quickly here, but when you ask yourself, when was I genuinely kind to myself? It's much more difficult. One key of that is connectedness to others. When you feel like you are connected to others, you are much more likely to be able to be self-compassionate. And so, you know, when people say, well, you need to, self-care is so important, and we all know that self-care is important, but very few of us actually do it, because we say, well, people think I should take more time for myself, but they have no idea all the responsibilities I have to do. There's no way that I could do all that. So we remind ourselves that every time someone says that to us, we are more and more disconnected from them, because they're saying that from a point of privilege. They have no idea what I'm going through. So when we feel like we're connected with others who have a capacity to understand what we're going through, there is a likelihood of knowing that, you know what, you are telling me about how you enact self-care or compassion in your life, and I now see how it's possible to do that while still trying to manage my responsibilities. It's just like it's showing a different way of being. It's a type of role modeling by people who we respect and see as types of peers.
So what I take away from that is that connecting with people who understand your circumstances is essential to your well-being.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience?
That connection is challenging, but feeling connected is an essential human experience wherever we are in life and whatever we are doing. And it can come in many different forms. The challenge is the forms it may come in are not the forms that we anticipated, or not the forms that we had wanted, or not the ways in which, because the people closest to us can at times disappoint us, but sometimes others can complement our ability to reconnect and rediscover ourselves with those relationships that are closest to us. And sometimes that dissipates the sense of frustration or disappointment and allows us to see our family and our friends and our spouses in ways that are new and reinvigorating.
Well, thank you so much. That's all the time that we have for now. I'd like to remind everyone that if you missed any part of this program, it will be rebroadcast on msfocusradio.org and available on demand. Follow the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation's Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram for times and access information. Our sincere thanks to Novartis for their support of this program, to all our callers for your support, and especially to Dr. Zachary White. Thank you so much for the time that you spent preparing and sharing this information with us.
Thank you, Casey.
Good night, everyone.